What's up, everybody? Welcome to
Downtime.
the show that's made in our downtime for you to enjoy during your downtime. I'm your host, Nathan Wind, and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Cameron Messer.
Hey, guys.
And the one, the only, JP Gomez.
How's it going?
All right, guys, so thank you all for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about Shazam. We all got back from the theater, saw it just last night, and we want to talk about it. So I guess let's open up this discussion by asking the question, is this the best DC movie?
Well, when you say DC movie, like what are you counting as a DC movie? Are you counting
List the movies that it's
DC
gonna need to be-
expanded universe?
Okay. Which I think is like what?
What movies are part of that? So some of our audience who may not know all of them.
So that consists of good old Man of Steel is the first one. Then we have
Okay.
Batman v Superman.
Okay. Did the Christopher Nolan ones?
No,
The Christopher Nolan ones, do they count?
No, those do not count.
Okay.
It's strictly Man of Steel,
Mm-hmm.
Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman,
Okay.
Justice League, Aquaman, and now Shazam.
Okay. To be honest, the competition is going to be a lot tougher now because The Dark Knight, compared to all of those movies, The Dark Knight is clearly the best.
I mean, I can't compare it to Aquaman because I have not seen Aquaman.
Same. Full disclosure, none of us have seen Aquaman.
So
That's
let's
apparently a
take
really
that
good
one away for the
Let's
moment,
just
just for
assume-
us.
Let's just assume, given the reception of Aquaman, that it's probably like top 3 at least.
Yeah, everybody keeps saying Aquaman is really good, but I've not heard people say that it's better than Wonder Woman. But from
Oh, yeah,
what
that's
we
true.
have seen, where do we think this ranks? I personally think
Third.
it's the best that I've seen.
Third for me.
Third.
Yeah.
You're talking about Batman v Superman being number 1, right?
No, that's like right there tied with Justice League on my book.
Oh,
For me, it would be Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, then Shazam.
Interesting.
really? You put Man of Steel above Wonder Woman? I mean, I love Man of Steel, but I just didn't expect that from you.
I really loved Man of Steel. I mean, I think partially because Christopher Nolan was the executive producer on it,
Well,
and he it felt kind of like even though The Dark Knight's not part of it, it kind of felt like one of those movies in its own right. I really enjoyed Man of Steel. You know,
I'm not sure if I felt the same way about that movie, mostly because it was helmed by Zack Snyder, and so you can like really tell that Zack Snyder did Man of Steel more so than Christopher Nolan. But
Yeah, I mean, I think Man of Steel is a really, really good for what it was, which is a reboot for Superman. You know, like, especially since it was a lot more grounded, whereas Superman's always kind of been this bright, colorful character, very lighthearted. Everybody refers to him as this Boy Scout. But in Man of Steel, it was really a more serious take on the character, and I personally really liked that. But
that's why I
wouldn't-
liked it too.
I would say that this movie, you know, Shazam itself, just nailed the essence of the character, which is, at its core, a 14, 15-year-old boy becoming a superhero.
yeah, we'll go back to the DC power rankings, I guess, because we need to talk about what Shazam actually is.
Yeah, and Shazam is this lighthearted take. He's a boy, about
Mhm.
14, 15, who gets superpowers by saying the word Shazam.
He meets a wizard, and the wizard gives him powers, and all he has to do is say Shazam.
And boom, he becomes ripped as shit,
Mhm.
like 25 years old, with like 7 different powers, like the strength of Hercules, the power of Zeus,
Mhm.
speed of Mercury,
The
like all
Flash.
this stuff. Yeah.
You might as well just like say
He's
the speed of
Superman.
the Flash, the strength of the Superman.
He's the
'Cause
prototype
this
of
game-
Superman.
Because this movie is like super meta. Because it's like it's weirdly like referential to DC. It kind of acts like DC is like the fantasy comics that it is.
Well, I
Which
mean,
like really confused me at certain points when they have like merchandising
For-
of Batman. I guess it's like Batman himself pimping himself out.
With my
it was to
Batarang
me, it was
replica.
Yeah.
DC not taking themselves this type of film like their other ones is very serious and everything. This was just a lighthearted, fun comedy superhero movie.
Oh sure, yeah.
I mean,
That's
but
PG. So which was even, you know.
But I mean, in a way, compared to the tone in a lot of the other movies that we had, which is a lot more serious, I think this was very refreshing, because it's kind of like, what would we all do if we got superpowers right at this moment? It's very lighthearted and fun, and just it's goofy. It's really goofy, and I think they realize how ridiculous this whole premise is.
The whole premise is just ridiculous from the start, and
I mean,
the
I don't
biggest
think
credit.
Shazam should be a serious character either.
No,
you know?
because
I think it would have been a completely. I don't think the movie would do as well if they did a serious take on it, like they do the other ones.
Because how are you gonna make it serious? Have the teenager suddenly becoming an adult man? You know, you could try, but it would come across as like really phony. I imagine a lot of the audience would pick up on that. So it's probably the best route that they did to combine like the average superhero origin story with the movie Big.
I will say he is the most in the DC group of superheroes. He is the most relatable, I think, to a person.
Well,
In my opinion, he's more relatable than Superman. He's more relatable than Batman. He's more relatable than Wonder Woman.
Well, Batman's like a rich asshole with daddy issues.
Yeah, but
and Superman's an alien. Like they're not relatable in general. I would argue. I don't think the
Not
DC heroes
too
typically are
relatable.
designed to be relatable. Marvel
And
heroes are kind of are.
I think it's because of the fact that DC positions their superheroes as more of a mythological figure. Like a lot of DC's backstory in their universe, comic books and otherwise, plays it up as sort of gods or demigods. And, they're kind of aware of that because you have, like, the subtitle for the Justice video games, Gods Among Us. Like, and also, like, half of Batman vs. Superman is just extrapolating about how much of a god Superman
How
is.
many Razzys
all the
should have that
Jesus
one?
references,
All
and Man of Steel,
the
where he,
blatant
spreads his
Jesus
arms.
references. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we get it. Superman is Jesus. Thank you, Zack Snyder. Thank you.
Yeah, that was.
I think DC tries to make their characters what we would want to be in terms of like, yes, we'd all want to be that rich
And their
type
method.
of playboy person, whether if you're Bruce Wayne or the Arrow. Or
And their method to do so is to make this sort of like larger than life type of thing. This sort of divine status of these
Right.
superheroes, as opposed to Marvel, who is kind of more of the ground level type of thing. Kid from Brooklyn, kid from Queens. The only one that's even close to the type of DC hero is like maybe Tony Stark.
Yeah, and even then, just
'Cause he's
due
a
to
rich
the
asshole.
nature of his powers, he's still a little more.
He's still a little more human because of the fact that it's entirely technology, but he's still the closest to a DC character, the closest to a Batman,
Yeah,
because he's also a rich asshole.
right. I think DC tries to make their villains more human-like in a little twisted way, more relatable. Where Disney or Marvel tries to make their heroes more human-like.
Well, this is speaking of the villains, that's one of the things I actually thought was really interesting about this movie was kind of how the movie opens up with, "Hey guys, spoiler territory. It's happening. This is your only warning." It kind of opens up with the villain's origin story, and it kind of tricks you into thinking it's the heroes, because it parallels the heroes. So like the villain, I don't remember his name. Do any of you remember this guy's name?
No.
His name wasn't very memorable, but his backstory I thought was he's in a car with his older brother and his father. They're on their way to some trip. I'm assuming during Christmas, based on the music that was playing.
Going to their grandfathers.
Okay, yeah, that was it.
Yeah, road trip.
And then he's like fucking around with this 8-ball, and all of a sudden these symbols show up on it. Boom! He's transported to.
He's the next candidate. He's transported into that room, and then he's considered the next candidate to become the champion.
The champion, but there's like 2 artifacts on him. There's the wizard guy who's basically saying, "Oh, you're a candidate to inherit my powers," blah blah blah. But then there's this like where the 7 deadly sins are like calling to him, and they're represented by these statues behind the wizard. where if he was to touch it, he would gain the power of the 7 deadly sins that can only be rivaled by the power of the wizard.
Mhm.
He's immediately drawn to it. He's told he's not worthy. Boom, gets kicked out of this mystical place. He's back in the car, and he starts throwing a fit. He's like, "No, I'm good enough. I'm good enough." And then his brother and his father are just sitting there like, "Dude, calm the fuck down," and it inadvertently caused a car wreck, and then they all blame him for it. And that's his whole thing, is he's been told apparently his whole life he's not good enough, and all he wants to do is be acknowledged. And Billy,
that was the closest thing he ever got to being acknowledged, is to having the literal powers from the wizard.
yeah, and then he was denied the power that was promised to him by the 7 deadly sins, which just made him mad. And that just motivates him like 30 years later to try and get that power back. And that's kind of where it leads to present day, where Billy's like a 14-year-old kid. The villain dude's like 45. He, Billy is finally chosen to be worthy. And that's kind of the whole premise of the movie, is this dude's jealousy just by the fact that he wants Billy's powers. I mean,
yeah, that's true. It's interesting though to see the dichotomy between the villain and the superhero, because normally with like most villains in really any sort of writing, not just comic books, is that the villain is made up to be this sort of mirror image of the hero. It's basically meant to display like what would happen if the hero did not have these sort of virtues and values to become a superhero to help people. Well, he will probably use it for evil, or just to abuse his powers.
And you kind of see that.
And you saw some of it by virtue of him being, just like a bratty little teenager. Because the wizard chose him, and he was just like, not because he was pure or anything like that, but he was like, "You're all I got left."
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, well, you're here. I'm about to die. Take my hand. Get these powers. Say my name."
That was funny. I like that scene. A lot of comedy in this movie, which was refreshing. I will say this film, unlike, and I know I rate it as my third favorite in this whole DC thing, I will say that a lot of DC movies don't make me feel like a kid versus this one did. This one was so lighthearted. It was full of comedy. It had sad moments, happy moments. But when I'm watching that, I felt like I was back in the early 2000s watching, the early Spider-Man movies or the Fantastic Four movies or, the dark Batman or Batman Returns and all that.
Oh,
so.
yeah, like the old 90s ones.
Yeah.
It definitely had a very different flavor to it. It to a certain extent, I guess we can kind of say it did kind of feel like a Marvel movie.
It did.
A lot more lighthearted in that tone.
It felt like an early 90s movie, Marvel movie. Not their newer Marvels.
Yeah,
to me, it felt their newer ones. Here's the Marvel new movies they're not like that lighthearted. They have a very deep messages to them usually. But this film felt like the early 2000 Marvel movies that came out.
I can see what you mean, especially with like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, how it's kind of like, Tobey Maguire got his powers, and the first thing he does is like beat up the lunch bully, that was picking on him by accident to a certain extent. But then, you see all these scenes of him leaping off of buildings to the one to the other, because he's just like, holy crap, I have these powers. What can I do with them?
This was just a fun movie. It wasn't, versus like if you were to go see like Man of Steel or Wonder Woman or
It's very heavy.
Captain Marvel or Infinity War. Those are heavy, very serious movies. Even though they're superhero movies, they have that really dark backstory, regardless if they're Marvel or they're DC. This one was like, okay, let me grab a beer, let me grab some popcorn, some candy, whatever. Let me go with the family or go with the friends, and we're going to have a laugh.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I personally like BVS, Batman v Superman, but I walk out of that movie and sometimes I'm just exhausted. Like, I appreciate it, but like, I walk out of there and sometimes I'm just like, oh boy, I just sat through the Ultimate Edition.
Did you bleed?
Did you bleed? feels like it sometimes.
Well, and I what I hope is they don't bring him into any of the other films. Shazam. I really want him to just stay doing his own thing.
That's
Don't bring.
not gonna happen.
Yeah.
I know,
They-
but see, here's my thing is that if what I fear is that his lightheartedness is going to go away and it's going to become one of those dark Justice League things or Man of Steel or Wonder Woman, and that's not who Shazam is.
I think under the hands of a less than capable writer, they would just have Billy be more serious when meeting up with these other superheroes. But I think under the hands of a good writer, we'd see this sort of dichotomy between Billy's still childlike wonder and innocence and naivety, facing off against, or just collaborating against the seriousness of, say, Wonder Woman or Batman. Because because like Batman would probably like get in the Batmobile, like under the hands of a creative writer. Batman would get into the Batmobile, and then Billy would be like, "Oh shit, can I come too?"
Yeah,
Can I ride with
I
you?
feel like it would be a
Please?
nice blend if it was kind of like how Deadpool is, serious but funny and in his own way. But the problem is like when I'm watching this film, what I really loved was that they didn't rely. They had CGI, but they didn't rely heavily on it like Wonder Woman or
I'd like some
Man
of
of
your finest
Steel
beer,
or
please.
Justice League or Suicide Squad or
Yeah.
Wonder Woman or Injustice. All these superhero movies are like a Marvel film that rely because of all the special effects and stuff. You have to rely on the heavy CGI. This was very 90s and very practical feel, and I was like, okay, so his suit's not CGI, cool. His like the VFX when he's shooting the lightning out or the truck.
It was good.
It was good.
It was good.
It wasn't perfect, but it worked for the type of film. But if you throw him in a Wonder Woman film or a Justice League film or Batman film, you're going to have that high quality VFX. And if you try to mix the two, it's not going to look good. It's going to really look bad. So I just really hope that's why I don't want them to do that. I think he just should stay on his own or not be put or have one of them enter his world.
I
like have
wish
Wonder
that-
Woman come into his world, but not have him go into her world.
Well, I miss the old days of the standalone superhero film. But like, as much as I agree with you, I would love for them to just leave this as its own thing. But then we got the last scene of the movie where he's
I
sitting
don't
with
understand
Freddy.
the slug,
The what?
the little thing
Oh,
he's talking.
I don't think he's talking about the credit scene. He's talking about
Oh.
like the.
Oh
before-
no! I'm talking
before
about
the-
before the end
starts.
credits,
Oh,
where
yeah.
he's sitting with Freddy in the lunchroom, and he shows up to have lunch with his best buddy
Yeah.
Freddy, and then he's like, "Oh, I hope you don't mind, but I brought my other friend
Yeah.
too." And then it's Superman.
Well, I mean,
you
like
know,
this thing.
like-
If
Or-
I think it's gonna work better if they enter Shazam's world versus him entering their world.
I'd agree with that.
Because their world requires $300 million worth of production value versus his, which is a lower budgeted film.
yeah,
you
you're not.
know.
It's not Man of Steel where you're destroying
No,
buildings.
you don't
Instead, the
need all
most
the
he tries
CGI
to jump
for
over one,
this,
and he
you know?
crashes into it.
If you have them enter his, you have Wonder Woman enter his world or Batman or Superman, yeah, they're gonna look out of place a little bit, but then he controls and you're not taken away from his goofy stuff.
I think if Warner Bros. Is smart, they would just like reboot the whole, not just the whole universe, but like the whole tone of the movie,
Mm.
so that their next Superman or their next Batman wouldn't be as serious as Henry Cavill or Ben Affleck.
I agree.
Because you still have, because I think they have an opportunity to turn it around and have a Superman that's still kind of like serious and upright and upstanding, but like when facing with Billy's antics, he just be like, "Come on, kid,
Yeah.
we got work to do."
Yeah, we got
Instead of just being like that, the dour and serious, like stone face that Henry Cavill was all the time.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of would be like, how they don't really come together, but you've got the X-Men people coming in with Deadpool, right? Well, X-Men usually requires a lot of VFX and a darker story, and then you throw the two of them practically in there. So
well, let's come back to that in just a second, though.
This episode is brought to you by water. It's wet.
All right, welcome back to our Shazam special. Cameron, what were you just saying about the...
well, I was saying that, could work if you wanted to bring other characters in here, is kind of do what Marvel did with, what was it, X-Men and Deadpool. You had a couple X-Men characters, and it with Deadpool, but it was still Deadpool's world, because a lot of the X-Men movies, like the Marvel and like the DC, required a lot, especially the newer ones, require heavily VFX and stuff that kind of take away from the story a lot. And they were darker storylines, where Deadpool's character makes fun of everything. So if you brought in, like, again, other DC characters into Shazam's world, it would, and not lose the focus of Shazam's character, and yes, he can have those serious moments like he did in this movie, but keep him lighthearted. I liked his character because he was a goofball. Like I said, he's the prototype, in my opinion, of any superhero out there. He's not perfect. He's not got it all figured out. He's a goofball,
I think that's what it is it was just such a breath of fresh air for DC fans like myself, to see something lighthearted and fun that realizes how ridiculous it was. I do want to say, I think that the movie maybe takes a little too long to kind of get it in gear. I feel like
to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, like we got it. He becomes a superhero. He's got he's in this foster home with his friend Freddy.
I
crippled.
definitely felt that way towards in the first third of the movie, where they tried to build up like Billy's whole life as a orphaned kid, and where the supervillain or the main villain, like how he is when he grew up, that whole thing where he was like some sort of scientist / therapist thing, and he was
that
just
was really weird.
I thought that was a little underrated.
I mean, at a certain point, I was like, okay, cool. I like the fact that I'm like, okay, I get it. You're having fun with your powers, but I need you to do something heroic. And then as soon as that happened, and the guy, I don't like the fact that he had to call him out for him to kind of get it. But I understand. I mean, let's be honest. If we all got those type of powers, at first we wouldn't want to go out and start fighting crime. We would want to have fun. But I'm watching this and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there's a point where it's like, all right, man.
Yeah, I think that was probably like the best route to do, to call him out, because it's like you're talking to someone who's literally immune to nearly anything. What else could hurt him besides mentally and emotionally?
Not to mention the fact that the person who calls him out is his best friend who's crippled.
Right. No, I don't mind him calling out. I'm just saying, like, it took him a little long to call him out.
Yeah.
And for him to call him out, and then it felt kind of forced at that point.
I see what you're saying.
Like they were dragging it out too much. And
yeah,
they realized they had to make a
I was like,
progression.
okay, cool. I like the fact that you're testing out all the powers and everything, but
yeah, you have to move on to the next act.
Yeah,
fast
move to
this part.
Yeah, speed up the act a little bit.
Yeah.
I still love the beer scene.
That was funny.
That
great. Reminded me of a classic, like I said, early 2000s, something you'd see in the 2000s.
Standard.
But that's also like what makes this movie really good. It's the fact that it dealt with the whole idea of a superhero in a realistic way, but it doesn't have to be like a serious realistic way. No, it just dealt with the logic of reality, of like actual human Earth. Like, what would happen if a real teenager became a superhero and he suddenly?
Oh my gosh, you're bulletproof! Wait, shoot him in the face.
One of the first things they would do: buy a beer. One of the second things they would do: go to a strip club, because they can do that stuff now.
Yeah, I mean, but it also makes you think about, like, okay, if I got those powers, and then something real, it's cool. I can shoot lightning out of my hands. I can charge phones. I can go buy beer. I can get shot. I can do all this crazy stuff. But am I really up for the challenge of taking on the responsibility that these powers come with.
Well, this is something I've been wanting to touch on for a little while, is that I think I've figured out why this story succeeds in the way that it does. Is that a lot of times nowadays, superhero like movies and TV shows, the fate of the world is at stake, you know. And like one of my favorite TV shows
Someone
is
wants
Arrow.
to take over the world,
Yeah,
always,
but
or
like
a universe.
One of my favorite TV shows is Arrow, and I kind of think to a certain extent that story is much more grounded in the sense that it's a man in his city trying to protect his city, whereas Shazam could obviously be more than that. But this is a story about a man, or a kid in this case, trying to learn how to be a hero to not only his city but to his family.
Right.
You know, it's a lot smaller scale, and I think that works to the movie's strength.
That was probably the better part of the movie, was trying to have this smaller scale stakes of like what you said about family and about himself. They tried to inject that sort of like world domination thing with like the main villain, but obviously like that was kind of that.
What
that was
I
Any
also-
of the other heroes could have stopped.
Well, what I
this
also
dude.
Yeah,
liked
like-
is the fact like DC does this, and then Marvel does this, except they didn't do this in Captain Marvel. They usually have the superhero or anti-hero figure out how to master their abilities way too fast. And in this one, I loved seeing him struggle to figure out what he could even do. That was a nice pace of change, you know.
Oh,
that's true.
I can shoot lightning out of my hand. Whoa.
Like, cool. But he he didn't really fully, I mean, he understood his full abilities, but I still, even at the end of the movie, I don't think he mastered them.
Yeah, I feel like
Which
he
I think
still has
was
a
great.
lot of room to grow.
That's
And
true.
the other superheroes they brought in.
Yeah.
And I hope they're in the other, if they do the other movies. You know, I hope they're in them.
Well, I think, and I mean, I'm obviously not a Shazam expert here. I'm very interested in reading the comics after this because I had such a great time with this movie. So I want to learn more about it. But I think the idea of like the Shazam family is fairly new. I don't think it was always around. I think it's within the last decade with the New 52 was when they kind of introduced the idea that he could transfer his powers to his family members.
Well, I mean, I think that would work if they continue with the theme of this being all about family.
Oh, for sure. But I just thought that for it being such a relatively new development in the long history of the character, it was pulled off very well in this movie. I just wish we could have seen his family do more.
That's what I was thinking too when that happened, because I thought there was like a really good payoff to the idea of family and the value of family. You know, what does family mean? And this movie suggested that family is not just your biological parents. It's about like people who
Care about you.
care about you, who support you, and want to help you.
And that's sprinkled all throughout the movie because it's a house full of foster children.
Maybe
That's
we'll
what Paul
see
Actor,
what
yeah.
the other kids can do in the follow-up film, which I think will be funny.
And
I
we
mean,
saw
because they
so
all
much
have really
growth. Everybody
different,
has room to grow.
diverse backgrounds. They all have different personalities, which you know, the little girl is like, I loved where she walks up to Santa. She's like, I've been really good this year. And Santa's like, what?
And this is like while she's this really
Old,
old
yeah.
superhero.
Mhm.
Like, how old was she? Was she like? Did they ever say exactly how old
She was probably like 8 years old. or
Yeah,
something.
8 years
like-
old.
She seemed like a little 8-year-old child who just doesn't know anything.
And it was so great to see that transition over to when she has superpowers. She's still this 8-year-old.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
they
you
could have
know.
made him, like, I think they did a great job with not losing their child or their teenage style or
I
young
don't
adult.
like violence.
Yeah,
but
like
I
they're
think we should kick their butts.
yeah, they're like their personalities. I think that's what made it fun as well. Just like Billy's character, you know, he's still a kid at heart.
Yeah, and then seeing Freddy still geek out while he's like this like 30-year-old man.
Yeah,
He's like, oh my gosh, I got a leg. I could fly.
like
you know. Like,
Yeah.
I thought that was really well done,
Mhm.
and I thought that payoff was really cool because. I mean, I'm going back a little bit to the fact that most of this movie is with Billy and his best friend Freddy, who
Yeah.
later gets powers, but Freddy's crippled. He can't walk without a cane, and there's that scene, the call to action
Yeah.
was when Freddy's like chewing him out, saying, "Look, I would kill to have what you have."
Yeah.
You know, and then later, you know, Billy kind of gets to give back to his family after they've been supporting him. When a big part of this movie was him saying, "It's all about you."
Yeah.
You know, you are the first person you should take care of. And it's kind of that whole theme of we are stronger together,
Yeah.
you know.
And it also establishes what separates Billy from the main villain of this movie.
Right.
Yeah, especially when the main villain, you know, with the 7 deadly sins, the one sin that he holds on to, he is envy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very kind of on the nose.
And not just that, but like his entire support group is basically a bunch of entities that are just using him, not really like supporting him.
Yeah, that's very true. And they even say multiple times throughout the film, I just don't think the guy cares. They're using you.
No, because he just cared about showing his worth and his power. You know,
he's like trying to validate his existence.
he's trying to validate him.
Especially when like his father and his brother are like heirs to some multi-million-dollar corporation. You know the typical, the Norman Osborn syndrome.
Yeah,
Kinda.
I guess, kinda.
It's like Harry never felt he was good enough for his dad, but you know his dad owned a big company. Maybe I'm stretching with that.
I think it's what I really loved is the fact that Billy finally realized, and they tied it into all together, because when the foster father was sitting with his wife and saying that, look, a home's not a home until you call it a home, and when he, at the end, when he's talking, they're at the dinner table, and you know Billy would never put his hand in, when they always said hands on deck, and then towards the end, and even when they're going to all become superheroes, he says hands on deck, and then he says that, you know, I'm happy to be part of this family, you know, summing it up and being part of having, you know, being home. And I think it was very important I realized Billy didn't realize what he had, what he was looking for was always there right in front of him when he got part of this foster
we completely
family.
forgot to touch on the fact that he's been looking for his mom forever. That's like the first thing we learn about him. He's been this runaway delinquent, and he's been searching for his mom, and he's already found like 20 different people.
Yeah, that's the whole backstory behind Billy Batson. You know, the fact that his mom abandoned him, which was kind of also a little underwritten. I felt, because you had this whole thing where it's like he's lost in the ferry because he dropped his compass and he was trying to find it, and then, you know, suddenly his mom isn't there anymore. I thought the reasoning for it was a little.
It was really weak.
I
saw you with the cops, and I just knew.
Yeah,
that
I was
they would
17.
take better care of you.
The police, they got dropped.
I would have really preferred that to be where she just couldn't find him, but then
either couldn't find him or just like
thought he was
flat out
dead.
lacked the motive to find him.
I kind of expected it to be.
But then you could say, oh well, then that wouldn't. Then, you know, those two could have a happy ending, and then he wouldn't realize that his real family is these people.
Yeah,
So,
I guess with.
I wish they just did a little better with the whole. Oh, I was 17, and then when I saw you with the cops, like.
Yeah, that was like.
Yeah.
Not buying that one.
No.
No, not really buying it. Maybe
Would
you're
you
just being
guys?
lazy.
I mean, would you guys recommend this as a wait, or would you recommend this for like everyone to go see with their family, their friends?
Go see it.
Yeah, go see
This
it.
was a great time. I had a great time with this movie. I mean, I think it's personally my favorite of the DC EU movies, and I'm gonna hunt down that Steelbook as soon as that comes out. I want that on my shelf.
Yeah, I give it 5 out of 5. I give it a 5.
I give it a Shazam.
A
5 out of
Shazam.
5.
And what's interesting is also that the director, this is his first superhero movie,
He does a lot of horror.
which he knows the low budget stuff.
Well,
too.
what's your rating before we get to that?
My ranking is, I don't know, go see it. You know, I'd say it's a pretty decent movie to see. You know, it has, you know, themes that actually like embodies itself around and sort of carries throughout. Multiple characters in the movie, so it has a sort of center to it that you can resonate with. The characters are relatable, so yeah.
Just don't go for a serious movie. It's not serious.
It's not a serious
Not
movie,
at all.
but
Not at all.
I don't think you need to go look for a serious movie for this kind.
I mean, that's not why we. It's not what I wanted going into
No.
it. Yeah, I wanted to be-
laughs, and I got laughs watching the trailer 4 times before I even went.
Yeah, I didn't even watch that. I just went in blind.
Oh yeah, the trailer that is definitely what sold me because it was just his ideas. Like Zachary Levi, he's just all buffed up, and he's just like, "How do I even pee in this thing? I don't know."
Yeah. How do I pee in the suit? Questions that need answers. But no, I think I definitely would recommend that everybody go see it. I think it was a lot of fun. Do we have any closing remarks here?
No, just go see the movie. I think it's a great film. It's a good movie if you want to go out with the family, you want to go out with the friends, grab a couple beers, popcorn, or whatever. It's just a great movie to go see.
It's a fun watch.
Fun watch.
One detail that I thought was like really, really good that I really enjoyed was, how the thing in a lot of movies, and like a lot of television shows where they have this scene where they're supposed to have two characters bonding with each other.
Yeah.
And they usually do that by like playing video games, and it's just them pretending that they're playing a video game, and they're just mashing buttons and something, and you hear just like generic sounds in the background. In this movie, the button mashing actually makes sense because they're button mashing in a fighting game. That's how most people play a fighting game. And not only that, it's not just any fighting game, it's Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
It's Mortal Kombat, which works on multiple levels because the developers of the Mortal Kombat has had a good relationship with Warner Brothers to the point where they actually made their own video game based on DC, the Injustice series. And also, Mortal Kombat is like what? It's always one of the top 3 games for teenagers who want but they can't have because it's too violent.
Yeah.
Oh
wow! I didn't even think about it up to that level.
It's,
I caught
it's
all the,
always.
He also quotes the one character in that game when they're all superheroes again.
fatality.
Yeah.
Oh,
They
yeah.
start quoting
Oh,
it.
and also I think Billy was playing Raiden, who's the
electric
guy.
guy.
Of course it is.
This is what were some of the dumb nicknames they tried to give him?
Uh,
Red Cyclone was catchy
it was
for
like Captain Sparkle Figures or something.
Jesus. I'm kind of sad that he was not in Injustice.
He never
2
got a
because-
name. They never gave him
Well,
a name in the movie.
How can they say his name without him? You can't.
No,
you
he
can't
has
say
to
my
say
name
it.
is Shazam because
No, he has to say it. They can say it, but he can't say it. So they could have named him.
But no, I think could they all? We don't know. Because,
Everyone can. I think
They
everyone
just
can
can't
name
hold the
him.
staff.
Well, he broke the staff, so
Yeah,
it
so,
doesn't
like,
matter anyway.
You could be Shazam, and I could say Shazam. You're not going to change.
Yeah,
But if
but
I
do
say
they
Shazam and I'm
change?
no.
like that.
Not
Did
unless
we
they're
see
only,
that?
like, the staff. They may
It's
now.
not like
They all need new names.
It's not like saying Beetlejuice and then like the person transforms. You have to say it
Yeah.
to
So
yourself.
they could have named him.
Yeah, I mean they could just name him Shazam.
They'll do it next movie, I'm sure.
Or just be like what Marvel does and just not give them like their superhero names. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
They don't really like give the superhero names. It's always like Tony Stark or
Hey Cap.
Hey Cap. That's the most we're ever gonna get.
Cap.
Yeah.
Tony.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We all recommend you go out and see Shazam. Please be sure to like and subscribe. You can follow us on our social media platforms. You can find me at Nathan_Wind.
At Cameron Messer 7.
You can find me in the movie theater seeing Shazam in theaters April 5th.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good one. We will see you next time.